Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to the course code Eng455, lecture number 24. As you can see that today our topic of discussion is language and the brain. What is the role of brain with respect to this language? That is an important and interesting point to see, because you know that it is because of the brain that we learn a language. Maybe again I will put a question mark, but it is sure that brain is the one that makes meanings with respect to language. If you remember, with respect to our auditory phonetics, we discussed that the role and the structure of ear in receiving the messages, auditory signals, and then carrying these auditory signals, transforming the sound waves again into some kind of messages, and then connecting it to the nerves, and the nerves then taking this message to the brain, which later on decode this message. So brain's role is very much important in all the process of reception of language or the production of language, and as well as the understanding of language. So far we have discussed in so many lectures what language is, what are the different features of language, what are the different aspects of language, and we have studied in detail the form, structure and meanings, the components of language. But today we are very much concerned with how the language is connected with brain, how we can study language in relation with brain. So our today's lecture would be primarily based on the language and the brain. The basic topic is language and the brain, in which we will study the structure of the brain. Not in that much, definitely we are not the neurologist, or we are not going to study brain with respect to the medical history, but some important parts of the brain, because we want to see that what parts of the brain they are involved in this language area. What are the parts which are considered responsible for this language production and understanding and receiving. Similarly, we will discuss some language disorders which are caused due to disorders in brains, because let me give you a brief history over here. It is, if we say that language part is there in our brain, there is a specific part where the language resides in the brain, but again we can put a big question mark on it, because these are the things which are just proposed by different linguists and different neurolinguists, and as well as different the different medical people, that okay, there is a portion in brain where the language resides, but again we are not sure about it. With the advancement in science, the different techniques they were introduced to examine the brain. Like we had the CT scan, like we can have MRI, like we can have the typography, different ways to actually narrate or to see how the brain works. And similarly, this way there were different the people who were interested, okay, that where the language resides in the brain, and then they proved with the help of certain experiments and certain observations, okay, that this is the part of brain where the language resides. But again, in some cases we can see the contradictions as well. So it is again we can say that okay, there is a certain part of brain that is fixed for language, but again we can put a question mark with it. We are with this brain, such a complicated organ, the most complicated organ in our body. It is very hard to claim the 100% claim that okay, this is the part where the language is in the brain. Again, not only these observations plus the scientific readings of the brain, plus there are certain other observations which are included to see, yes, okay, language is there in this part of the brain. What are these things? Like the language disorders. For example, when a person, he got a hit, he got a stroke on certain part of his head, and as a result certain part of his brain damaged, and if it resulted to certain damage in his language thing, then on the basis of this relationship, the psycholinguists and the neurolinguists, they propose, okay, because of it can be because this disorder was happened, this language disorder happened as a result of stroke at this part of the brain, so we can see, okay, that these things are there in this part of brain. But again, mean all of these assumptions. And with respect to that, with respect to language disorders, we focus the most important type of language disorder that is discussed to see the connection between language and brain, and that is aphasia. The typical disease or the typical language disorder that is created because of certain damages to certain brain areas. So let's start with the structure of the brain. Now the human brain, again I am telling you that I am not focusing each and every single part in the brain. I am discussing just important parts to make you familiarize, okay, what kind of structure the brain has, and then we will more focus on the areas which according to certain medical people, or which according to certain researchers or neurolinguists are the responsible for language production. But before that, some important parts of the brain. Now the thing is, the brain is basically composed of neurons. What are the neurons? Neurons are actually the nerve cells that are the basic information processing units of the nervous system. The neurons, they are actually the small cell-like structures, they are called nerves, and their basic function is to transport message from here to there, from one part of the brain to the other part of brain, from that part of the brain to another part of the brain. So the whole brain, the parts of the brain, they are linked with help of these neurons. At the same time, remember, these neurons, they are responsible because they transport message to the brain, and because of that we can have different type of motion, we can have different type of reflex action, we can have this, even the production of language is even because of these neurons, and the understanding is also because of these. So the neurons, they are the basic building units of the brain. Then another important part of the brain is cerebral cortex. Now what is this cerebral cortex? Cerebral cortex is a gray wrinkled mass. You will see, if you see that this is the part of the brain where the color is the gray, and it is a wrinkle, like just like the wrinkles on the faces, and it is a combination of that mass gathered together that sits over the rest of the brain. The remaining part of the brain is there based on that cerebral cortex of the brain, and accounts for language representation and processing. So this cerebral cortex, it is responsible for language representation and processing. We will see, when we will see the diagrams, we will see, okay, where this cerebral cortex is, because cerebral cortex is important with respect to this language thing. Then another important structure in this brain is the longitudinal fissure. Longitudinal in the direction of length, which separates actually the brain. It is considered that the whole brain, this is if we consider this is the brain part, then the whole brain is in between, there is a line, in between there is a line, and the whole brain, it is divided into two parts, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, and the line dividing these two parts of the brain, these two hemispheres of the brain, they are known as the longitudinal fissure. And then there is another important part, that is the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is the bundle of nerve fibers that connects the two hemispheres. Again, we have these two parts, but again these two parts are linked with the help of certain nerves, which are not only a single or two or three nerves, but a bundle of nerves that are called known as the corpus callosum. Now let's see with the help of the diagram where these different parts are. So if you look at this figure, the different important parts of the brain, they are being highlighted, but the one that I have talked about is this, This is the corpus callosum. If you see, these are the bundle of the nerves that connects the left hemisphere with the right hemisphere. And then below it over here we can have this cerebral muscles or cerebral, that the gray structure. And if you see that over here, there is a line at the that, because this is the figure that you are seeing, at the moment you are observing, that figure is once showing you one side. So definitely that is one side. It means there is somewhere in between over here there would be the separating line, that is the longitudinal figure. So these are the some important areas with respect to the language. Then you can see over here, if you look at this ending part, these are the parts where the nerves, they enter into the brain. The nerves from the backbone area, yes, from the backbone area, the nerves that over here, at the backbone, at the back of your head, the bundle of the nerves from the backbone enter into the brain. So this is that area. And over here, we get the senses and the transportations of the messages to over there. And over here you can see that other important part of the brain that is having a shape like leaves. So this is some kind of a medical representation of brain, that how the different parts of the brain there are certain more important parts of the brains which are highlighted over here. And every part, single part in the brain is responsible for certain action. And if you want to see in the details, you can have the more structural detail about the brain in Google or in any other search engine. But with respect to language, we are just focusing certain parts of the brain which are more related to this language thing. If you have another look of the brain, now over here you can see that the brain, this is the top portion, if you see the figure, and then if you see that overall clearly cut, the brain, it is divided into two parts, the left and the right hemisphere, and in between this is the line, the line where that is the separating one, that is separating the two parts of the brain. So this is another view of the brain where you can see clearly on the one side there is left hemisphere, and on the other side we have this right hemisphere, and this is another way to represent the human brain. But to make it very clear over here, keep this thing in mind, that we are only focusing the structure of the brain with respect to language, and we have seen that what areas are important. We have seen that there is a longitudinal figure, a dividing line between left and right hemisphere, then there is a corpus callosum, a bundle of nerves which connects the left hemisphere with the right hemisphere, and a cortex where it is considered that language processing and language thing that are done. So these are the areas important in our brain with respect to language. Now, functions of the brain hemispheres. As I mentioned that the structure of the brain, that it is quite complicated, but it can be quite clearly observed that the brain, it is divided into two hemispheres, the right hemispheres and the left hemisphere. Now what these two hemispheres, what is their role, what is their importance? In terms of muscle movement, each hemisphere is responsible for half of the body. Yes, this is a contralateral responsibility. And one thing very interesting, the left side of your brain is responsible for the right side of your body, and the right side of your brain is responsible for the left side of your body. This is quite interesting phenomena, that the left hemisphere, it does not control the left side of body, rather it controls the right side of your body. And the right side of your brain, it controls the left side of your body. So they have the contralateral responsibilities. They do not have the direct responsibilities, they have contralateral. Contralateral mean the different part, but organizing or managing the different part of the body. So right hemisphere, left side of the body, left hemisphere, right side of the body. And in terms of higher cognitive function, the hemispheres are lateralized, usually this thing, they have divided their responsibilities into two hemispheres, but for the most complicated type of action, for the most complicated or higher cognitive functions, we have lateralization. I mean, lateralization is that the same part works for the same part of the body. Mean, again, consider it, the normal routine of the brain is the normal functions of the left and right hemispheres, they are the contralateral, have contralateral responsibilities, but for the more cognitive and higher cognitive functions, they have the lateral responsibilities. Lateral means that right for right part, left hemisphere for left part of the body. So now further, what kind of lateralization or what kind of the activities, the cognitive activities they have taken. For example, the left hemisphere, it is considered that it is the analytic, it performs the analytic task, and the people who are good in mathematics and languages learning and all these things, it is said that okay, their left hemisphere is more strong because they have more analytic, they can perform the analytic tasks more easily. So left hemisphere is considered responsible for good analytic tasks, whereas on the other hand, the right hemisphere is considered responsible for recognition of complex patterns. For example, faces, melodies, these memory, such type of things they are kept in the right hemisphere of the brain. Now another important figure, to make it very clear that these right hemispheres and the left hemispheres, what are the functions that they perform. If you look on the left side of this brain, okay, this is the left side of the brain, left hemisphere of the brain. The left hemisphere of the brain is responsible for logical reasoning, for language, for analytical reading, grammar, punctuation. Then we have sequential details, letters and numbers, decoding, short-term, auditory memory, things according to rules and patterns, fine motor, sense of time, planned, controls, right side of body. These are all the functions which are controlled with the left hemisphere of the brain. And on the other side, we have the right hemisphere of the brain, this side. Now what are the functions of the right hemisphere of the brain are that it is more creative, it stores pictures, it is responsible for intuitions, tonality means using different tones to convey different messages, illustrations, once again the storehouse of the pictures, it is where the images are stored rather than the concepts. Then simultaneous, big pictures, symbols and spatial encoding, this is long-term visual memory, things outside of the square, creativity. You can say the right hemisphere is more creativity, is concerned with creativity. It is gross motor, it has no sense of time, it is spontaneous, it controls the left side of the body. So this way we can divide the responsibilities and the functions of the left and the right hemisphere part of the brain as separately. And as you can see from the list of all these things, you will see that majority of the language functions, they are performed by the left hemisphere, whereas few of them are also linked with the right hemisphere, where the creativity factor is there, where the prosodic features are involved, or where for understanding the semantic understanding or figurative understanding of the concepts, you store certain pictures or illustration. So the both hemispheres, but left hemisphere is more responsible for the language. If you see, the punctuation parts are there, the grammar parts are there, because it follows, the left hemisphere is responsible for following the rules and regulations, the grammatical patterns and all these things with respect to the language, the things which are related to language. So what is meant by lateralization? As I mentioned, that the left and right hemisphere of the brains, they have usually the contralateral functions, left controlling the right side, right controlling the left side. But at the same time, for some higher cognitive functions, their responsibilities are lateral. Then what is meant by lateralization? Lateralization is specialization of brain functions in either left or right hemisphere of the brain. As just we have discussed that okay, the right hemisphere of the brain is responsible for these things, the left hemisphere of the brain is responsible for these things. So we are fixing certain responsibilities or functions to these hemispheres individually. So this is called some kind of lateralization. And this lateralization said to occur around puberty age, mean the people, when the children they enter from the age of 15 plus, they are getting into adulthood, entering into adulthood stage, and then more pronounced with right-handed people than left-handed people. Again, another important observation, that these lateralization processes, they are more observable with the people who are right-handed than the people who are left-handed, because with the left-handed people the things that are observed are more different. They are different from the normal human beings who use right hands for the works. Now what are these observations are that right-hand people, they exhibit language difficulties with damage to the right hemisphere. It has been observed that the right-handed people, when because of certain reason, if the right hemisphere of the brain gets damaged, they face difficulties with language. On the other side, the left-handed people show language representation in both hemispheres. If their right side of the brain is damaged, they keep on going on smoothly with the language, because then the other part of the brain is working. But if the both parts are damaged, then their language efficiency is damaged. So left-handed people, they are their phenomena is something more interesting, because they are using both hemispheres at a time for this language thing. Now, said to contribute to differences between children and adults with respect to second language learning, and these lateralization processes, they are more observable when the children they are learning the second language learning. If you remember, we talked about the second language learning when we are consciously learning another language, not the native language. So for these conscious efforts to learn second language, then the brain or the lateralization process is very important. The working divided between left and right hemisphere, because we have to use our brain accordingly for different tasks. Now again, to briefly summarize lateralization, left hemisphere dominant. Now left hemisphere, the left part of your brain is dominant in the people who are usually art critics, literary critics and music critics. They have, in other words, you can say they have the higher aesthetic sense. The people where the left hemisphere is dominant, they have the higher aesthetic sense, and that's why they usually become some type of critics, like the music critics, like the art critics, like the literary critics. They because they have a higher aesthetic sense, so they can judge a piece of art or a literature or a writing in a better way than the others, than the normal human beings. Whereas with the people where right hemisphere is balanced, that left hemisphere is not dominant, rather the left and right hemisphere, they both are balanced. They are usually the artists, they are the authors and the musicians. These are the people who are more comfortable with language things some way, like artists or like authors using language in written form, musicians using language in singing form. They have tendency for these sort of professions. For example, you have seen that people, when you see someone, when you meet someone, their abilities, for example, a child, when a parents seeing their child and they go, okay, my son is going to be a doctor, or my son is going to be a painter. There are certain reflections in their behaviors which show them that which profession they are going to take, because of this in the structure of the brain or the function of these brains, different parts of the brain. They have to prefer certain professions, or they show certain kinds of interests. Now the major focus, the brain areas involved in language. Now we have talked about different brain areas, but now the most important areas of the brain which are considered responsible for language. Now if you look in the figure, these are some major areas. Now I would like to highlight over here the Broca's area, one of the most important area in our brain. You will see with respect to language. You will see how. Then we have the primary motor cortex. This color, this organ, this part of the brain, it is primary motor cortex. Then we have supramarginal gyrus. If this is the place where supramarginal gyrus is there. Then we have angular gyrus, this part of the brain, and yes, important to highlight this wrinkles area. This is the wrinkles area, to make a difference between Broca area and wrinkle area. The Broca area is over here and wrinkles area is over here. And then we have the primary auditory area, which is there, that when we receive the auditory signals, then they are perceived by the brain. And this part, the primary auditory area, is the area where these auditory signals, they are received, and later on they are decoded, and the messages they are understood. So these are some of the important areas of brain with respect to language. Now, where language lives. I mean, we have discussed, okay, these are the important parts of the brain with respect to language, but what is the area where actually the language lives? Again, I have highlighted the same the areas with the Broca areas, the wrinkle areas, the motor cortex, and the auditory cortex. These are the four most important areas with respect to language, but actually where the language actually resides, again with question marks. According to linguists, according to neurolinguists, and according to the researchers, two of the regions of the brain, left hemisphere, that play important roles in language processing are Broca areas and wrinkles areas. That's why I was telling you that more focus on this Broca area and the wrinkles area, because and both of them are in the left hemisphere. And as we have already discussed that the language is usually associated with the left hemisphere of brain. And inside the left hemisphere of the brain, there are the two highlighted areas, Broca areas and the wrinkle areas, which are considered more responsible for language thing. I mean, according to some certain researches, these are the areas where actually the language resides. Broca's areas is activated in hearing individuals when they are speaking, and in deaf people when they are singing. Mean in these people, they with respect to this auditory thing, their Broca areas is more activated, whereas the wernicke area is involved in the comprehension of both speech and science. So the Broca areas is important with respect to the language reception, whereas the wernicke area is important with respect to understanding of speech. Now this speech can be both in the sound form or it can be in the sign form as well. So both types of these things, they are understood, and they are focused in these Broca's and wernicke parts of the brain. And if in this figure you can clearly see, this is the Broca area, once again this part, and again this is the wernicke area. So these are the two important parts of the brain with respect to language. Again I will highlight five most important parts of the brain which are involved in language. Number one, visual cortex. Now visual cortex, as the name makes it clear, visual is closely connected to your visual abilities, and with your visual abilities, what you can see the sign language and you can see the written language. So to get the written language and to understand the written words, or to understand the visual stimulation, you use your visual cortex part. It is considered important to receive the visual stimulation or visual signals. Then we have angular gyrus. Angular gyrus, what does it do? It transforms visual representations into auditory chords. Whatever you see, that is again transformed, decoded, interpreted into auditory chords. Auditory chords are the chords which could be understood by the brain. So this is the part angular gyrus. And then we have wernicke area. What wernicke area does? Interpretation. Remember, the wernicke area is always and always associated with interpretation, understanding. So whatever the visual codes or auditory codes you are getting, the wernicke area, it interprets them, it understands them, it decodes the actual message, and it is the wernicke area where the language becomes meaningful to us, where we are able to understand the messages inside the languages. Then we have the Broca's area, which controls speech muscles via motor cortex. Now, why we need to control the speech muscles? For example, to speak certain types of sounds or words, I have to use the different speech organs, and in the control and the production of different. For example, whatever I want to see, I want to see that I want a new car. Now, for the production of these individual words, I need to use the specific mouth speech organs. And then these Broca areas, with the help of this motor cortex, controls the different organs to produce this speech. And at the same time, because we receive the auditory signals with the help of ear, so again this reception through this ear, this is again controlled by Broca's area with the help of motor cortex. So important thing is motor cortex, and motor cortex is the place where, with the help of which words are pronounced. When we want to pronounce a word, the whole mechanism it gets activated, and this mechanism is of motor cortex, which gets activated to produce a language. So these are the 5 major areas with respect to language, with respect to understanding, interpretation, reception of both with respect to production of language as well as with respect to reception of language, not only auditory with the help of auditory organs, but also with the help of the visual organs. Now, if we now let's see each and every part in clearly. Okay, the number 1 area. Okay, this is the visual cortex. This is the number 1 area of the brain. This is where the visual cortex is. And again, what is visual cortex? It receives the visual messages. What visual messages? The things that you see. For example, some written piece of language, or some certain sign language that you see, or you see a picture, for example. Again, you get the visual messages. Then the angular gyrus. This is the part of angular gyrus where which transforms these visual representations into auditory signals. And again, we have wernicke's area over here. This is the wernicke area. This is beige. And what is the responsibility of wernicke area? It interprets, it understands the auditory signals. Then we have Broca's area. The Broca area over here, this is the Broca area, which actually, what does it do? It controls speech muscles. All these organs which are responsible for speech production, they are controlled by the Broca areas with the help of motor cortex. So finally, the motor cortex is with the help of which word is pronounced. So these are some important areas of the brain which are involved in language production, reception and understanding, because all these things are important. If you are just producing sounds not making sense, again this is useless. Receiving sound not making sense, are useless. Understanding sounds but are unable to produce or receive any sound, again certain complications are there. So all these are areas are important in this with respect to language production and reception and understanding. Now moving back to the same area of discussion, the role of right and left hemisphere. The left hemisphere, we are very much done with it. With the left hemisphere, where that we were studying so far. Remember, left hemisphere where the language resides, and inside the left hemisphere we have just studied that Broca area, the wernicke's area, this motor cortex, angular gyrus, all these parts are in the left hemisphere. They are located in the left hemisphere. So the left hemisphere is the most responsible organ for speech production, for speech understanding and for speech reception. But over here we have a question. It means if all the language thing is with respect to the left hemisphere, then is there no role of right hemisphere with respect to language? So to make it clear, yes, with respect to language we have certain things that are there in right hemisphere. mean not very much. The right hemisphere has other responsibilities, it has not very much responsibilities with respect to language, but again it can perform certain duties. Like since Broca, the left hemisphere is roles in language has been central, and right hemisphere has viewed as non-language hemisphere. As I told you, that right hemisphere is considered as non-language hemisphere because it does not have any direct relationship with language production, reception and understanding. But at the same time, it has certain things, it has certain roles which are somehow can be related to language. What are these? Actually, according to certain observations, in split brain patients, language can emerge from the right hemisphere. Now, what are these split brain patients? The split brain patients are those in which maybe some natural reasons, or maybe because of certain accidents or certain any type of reasons, the brains they get split, and when they get split, it has been observed that their right hemisphere is able to perform the language duties. Then another duty is that the right hemisphere cannot produce speech, use phone to grapheme correspondence or understand syntax. Phone to grapheme, phone is actually the phonological sound, the smallest unit of sound, and grapheme is the smallest unit of written language with respect to written alphabets. So their relationship can be best understood with the help of right hemisphere. At the same time, the right hemisphere it helps us to understand the syntax, and the right hemisphere can extract basic meaning. It is another important role that has been observed. But okay, to conclude, we can say that right hemisphere, it does not have any direct link with this language thing, with this language production, reception or understanding. But at the same time, so there are certain responsibilities that can be performed by the right hemisphere with respect to language. So we cannot totally say, okay, the right hemisphere is totally a non-language area. No, the certain observations and the certain things have shown, okay, though their part is not of major importance, but still they play certain minor roles with respect to this language. So now we have seen that, okay, what is the structure of the brain, what are the important organs in the brain with respect to this language. Now another topic that we are going to start is that language disorders. Now, to trace the history of language disorders, 3000 years ago, the Egyptian period, and the people they have reported the loss of speech factors after certain blow. With the help of these if you know pictograms. Do you know what pictograms are? Actually, pictograms is kind of language of the old age time. They do not have the written symbols like us A, B, C, D. Rather, they used to represent this language with the help of pictures, pictograms. So through these pictograms, the researchers they have found that, okay, during the Egyptian period, they have reported certain cases in which, because of certain reasons, or a person gets some blow onto the head, so he loses his speech as a result of that stroke. So the history of these language disorders is quite old. 3000 years ago, and the language disorders, these problems were there. But in 1861, the Broca was the first person who finds damage to left inferior frontal region, that is the Broca area, named as Broca area, of a language impaired patient in post-mortem analysis. While performing the post-mortem analysis in 1861, the Broca, he discovered that, okay, when the people who were having the language disorders, when their bodies were performed post-mortem, it was observed that the left inferior frontal region hemisphere was damaged. So because as I told you that these were certain observations of some of the researchers that have made it known, okay, the language resides in this part of the brain. So again, this was the discovery of the Broca, and from where he performed several more research is to assume that okay, the left hemisphere, it has certain connection with this brain, because when it gets damaged, you get certain type of language disorder. In language disorders, 90 to 95% of cases damage is due to left hemisphere. That's why it has proved, I mean, again with a question mark, it has been established that okay, the language resides in the left hemisphere, because in 90 to 95% cases, if they get a stroke on their left side of their head, or their left hemisphere gets damaged, they have these language disorders, which shows that okay, the language is something which is related to left hemisphere of the brain. On the other side, but there were few cases, 5% to 10%, where even the right hemisphere was damaged, but still they were having, these people, they were having some sort of language disorder. So we'll see what are the major types of disorders, and with respect to major types of disorder, our basic focus would be on aphasia. So let's see what are some major types of language disorders. The first type of language disorder is, important disorder is, that is paraphrasia. Now paraphasia is actually substitution of a word by a sound, an incorrect word or an unintended word. The people who are having this paraphrasia thing, they usually replace words with sounds, or they pronounce incorrect words, and they use unintended word. They mean the word they are not intended to use, but they still keep on using them. So these people, they suffer from the paraphrasia. Then we have the neologism. Neologism is another important type of language disorder. It is some type of paraphrasia, but over here the people who are suffering from neologism, they usually use the novel words. I mean the words you haven't heard before, and these people, they would utter them. So totally novel. The people with the paraphrasia, the ordinary paraphrasia, they use different words, unintended words, replace words by the sounds, but their words are somehow similar to the actual language they know. But in this neologism, the people who pronouncing the certain words or sounds, that words or sounds are totally novel, never heard before. Then we have non-fluent speech. Yes, definitely the non-fluent speech, the people who are unable to speak fluently, the thing that we usually call stammering, mean that these people, they are not able to speak properly, to speak fluently. So this stammering is actually non-fluent speech, is a kind of language disorder. Then we have agraphia. Agraphia is impairment in writing. These people, they have problem in writing. And alexia is disturbance in reading. And alexia, the students or the people with alexia, they are unable to read properly. So these are some types of the language disorders which are related to brain activities. But again, our major focus would be on aphasia. What is aphasia? Aphasia is a language deficit caused by damage to the brain, often be a stroke or an accident. As our major focus of the lecture is on language and the brain, so we have seen that okay, how the language, it is associated with the left hemisphere of the brain. But now again, if these parts of the brain, they get damaged, what kind of language disorders you can observe, what kind of language deficiencies are created by damage to these different parts of brain. Such disorders, they are referred as aphasia. In aphasia, we have basically three types of aphasia: Broca's aphasia, Wernicke's aphasia, and global aphasia. Broca's aphasia, making the name clear, if your Broca area in left hemisphere gets damaged, and as a result you have certain non-fluent type of speech, that is known as Broca aphasia. And if because of certain accident your wernicke area of brain gets damaged, and you have fluent speech but meaningless, you speak but you are not intelligible for the others, so such type of aphasia is wernicke aphasia, and global aphasia is the total loss of language when the people they totally lose their language. At the same time we have some minor types of aphasia as well, like conduction aphasia, subcortical aphasia, transcortical aphasia, or motor sensory aphasia. But the major types were Broca aphasia, wernicke aphasia, and global aphasia. So let's discuss them in detail. We will start with Broca aphasia. Now, Broca aphasia, again the non-fluent speech. Let's see an example quoted in Henry, page 637. Now, the people they are suffering from Broca aphasia, what kind of speech they produce? If you look and try to say these words. Yes, try. Good. You will see that there is a stammering kind of effect is created when you try to speak cookie, jar, break. Their pauses, fall, over, pause, chair, not the proper syntax is created. Again, the words are randomly picked, and they are pronounced without fluency. So this type of aphasia is known as the Broca aphasia. Now, the Broca aphasia, it is usually quite appear with the people who are definitely by some natural reasons or by some accidental parts they get this Broca aphasia. And it is observed that the Broca part of the left hemisphere, it gets damaged, and because of the damage to the Broca area, this non-fluent speech type or stammering thing happens. Now, Broca aphasia, according to Broadman, page 44 and 45, lesions in the left inferior frontal region. As I told you, this was the beginning of the Broca. He was an important researcher or a scientist who actually discovered, he was a doctor, you can say, some kind of neurosurgeon, something. He discovered while performing this post-mortem, he discovered that the people with the language disorders, this non-fluent type of speech, they were usually the left hemisphere. There was a typical part in the left hemisphere that was damaged, and from there he named it as Broca. With his name, it was named as Broca area, and later on different observations and researches they proved it. Okay, yes, there is a Broca area. So because when this Broca area in the left hemisphere it gets damaged, as a result we have this non-fluent or Broca aphasia. This is as a result of this Broca aphasia, we have non-fluent type of speech, we have labored and hesitant speech. Once again, the people, they are unable to convey themselves fully. They are hesitant, there are pauses, and there are the words which they are said in the chunks, and most also lost the ability to name persons or subjects. Yes, if you remember, there are many people around you. Usually in the old age it also happens that the people, they forget the names of the objects or the persons or the subject. They are unable to recall the names of the things. And this type of aphasia is usually named as anomia, particularly relating to the observation where the people, they forget the naming thing, they forget the nouns thing. Then can utter automatic speech like hello. They are able to produce the normal routines like automatic speech word like hello, good morning. These things are very much fine. Comprehension relatively intact. Again, not only their speech production ability gets suffered, but actually at the same time their comprehension thing, the ability to understand language, it also gets somehow damage. Then most also have partial paralysis of one side of the body, that is hemiplegia, and usually it has been observed if they left, if they have the one side of the body paralyzed, usually this stammering occurs in those people. If you have ever seen a patient with one side of the body as paralyzed, you will see their speech would be always non-fluent and they would be stammering, because this area in the left hemisphere, it usually gets damaged, and if extensive, not much recovery over time. If there is a minor damage, then it can be recovered, but if the damage is very much extensive, and then it is very hard, it takes too much time to recover, and sometimes the people cannot recover even. There are certain cases. Broca speech, aphasia, again certain characteristics. Speech is very halting, and function, and some major categories are that function words are totally omitted. The people suffering from Broca aphasia, the non-fluent speech, it is also known as non-fluent aphasia. The people, they omit the function word. They do not use preposition, conjunctions and articles in their speech. Their pronunciation is simplified. Mean they do not use the for example, if they tell about the past thing, they will not use the past tense of the verb. They will use the simple verb. And similarly, some sounds even they are omitted from their words pattern. For example, instead of saying spoon, they would say spoon. So this way, their pronunciation thing, they make the complicated words pronounced. They are pronounced simply by omitting certain sound. And then inflectional endings, as I told you, that the endings of the verbs showing the tenses, or the endings of the nouns showing the plural cases, these things are totally omitted. So we can, on the basis of these observations, we can see that in Broca aphasias, they are aware of their language deficit, because they know that they have this problem. Now the Broca patients turn out to have a comprehension problem when carefully tested passive sentences. Now the people, they perform certain tests, and they were performed with their comprehension test with respect to passive sentences and attention to determiners. And it was clearly observed that while using the passive sentences, they use word order strategies rather than syntax. Mean the way the passive rules are used, they do not use them the same way. Actually, they use the other way. The passive, the words order strategies, they are complicated. At the same time, they attention to determiners, they do not pay any attention to the determiners. As already mentioned, that they omit the function word. They do not use function words in their speech, and they have these problems with respect to syntax. So overall, it can be assumed that the people suffering from Broca aphasia, they lack the understanding of syntactic components of language. Usually the part of the language which is more rule governed, and the sentences production according to rules and regulation, this thing is usually damaged with respect to this Broca aphasia. Then after the Broca aphasia, wernicke aphasia, as the name is clear, then if the wernicke area in your left hemisphere gets damaged, the speech, the language disorder that is created is known as the wernicke aphasia. And usually this is the fluent aphasia, because the people suffering from wernicke aphasia, they do not have any problem with fluency. They are quite fluent speakers, but they have certain other problems. Look at the example. This is the example. Read it. Examiner, what kind of work have you done? Patient, we, the kids, all of us, and we were working for a long time in the, it's the kind of space, place rear to spade on. Then examiner, excuse me, but I wanted to know what work you have been doing. Patient, if you had said that, we had said that, Poomer, near the fortunate, tempu, all around the 4th of March. Oh, I get all confused. Now, what are your observations from this speech? The fluency factor is there. They are not stammering after pronouncing every single word or 2-3 words. The fluency factor is there, but again, there are certain problems with their problem. Do you have certain observations? What are the problems over here? So let's see the problems with the people having the wernicke aphasia. The first thing is what wernicke aphasia, the lesion in posterior of the left superior temporal gyrus extended to adjacent parietal cortex, mean simple words. The wernicke area in the left hemisphere gets damaged. So as a result, the wernicke aphasia is caused. The problem is not with the fluency, but the problem with wernicke aphasia is that they contains many paraphrases. They, instead of saying one word, they would provide another replacement for word, and won't be able to say it clearly. If they want to say something, they would alternate, change that word with another word seems closer to it. For example, instead of bread, they would say butter, or instead of bread, they can say cake. So they change their vocab. They have problems with their vocabulary. The sentences are okay most of the time, okay with respect to syntax, but empty sentences. You do not get any meaning out of their sentences. They are speaking and speaking, and you are not getting any single thing out of it. So the problem is that grammatically they are fine, but with respect to meaning, they are meaningless. You are unable to comprehend what they are saying. Cannot repeat words or sentences, unable to understand what they read or hear, usually no partial paralysis, no body paralysis is there, but again they suffer from these problems. Wernicke patients clearly don't have just a comprehension problem. A speech is typically somewhat incoherent. As you have seen in the example, no cohesion in the response of the patient. You are unable to understand because they are randomly talking about so many things, and they cannot convey what they want to say. And on the other hand, these patients, they perform very poorly on semantic judgment. As I told you, no semantic, their speech that is meaningless usually. Now for example, the sentences they can produce: dog, cat, turnip. What do you get out of this sentence? Or man, woman, trout. Do you get any meaning out of this sentence? They are randomly using certain verbs, certain nouns. Syntactically they are fine, but semantically they have problem. So we can see that the people with this Wernicke aphasia, they have deficiency with respect to semantic component of language. Now again, to make it clear, as I was telling you, that for the Broca aphasia, the Broca part of the brain is damaged. For the Wernicke aphasia, the Wernicke part of the damage. So to make it clear, as you can see that okay, these are the parts, the Broca's areas and the Wernicke areas, where these deficiencies or these problems there. If these areas in the brains gets damaged, so as a result we can have, if the Broca area is damaged, the Broca aphasia. If the Wernicke area gets damaged, the Wernicke aphasia. Now finally to global aphasia. As I've told you that three types of aphasia: the Wernicke, Broca, and then global aphasia. The global aphasia is actually an extreme kind of aphasia, where the people, they do not lose language with respect to syntactics or with respect to semantics. Rather, they lose the total language. And actually, what happens? Their whole left hemisphere, it is totally damaged, or extensively damaged, and as a result they have deficiency in comprehension and production of language. Sometimes they are, if they are able to produce few sounds out of their mouth or few words, but they are still unable to produce language. They have severe language problems. So these people, they are very much difficult to treat, and it's hard to solve their problem because of their severe damage to their brain. So to summarize these aphasias, we have Broca aphasia. In Broca aphasia, what happens? We have what type of speech is there? In Broca aphasia, we have non-fluent speech. The people, they are not fluent, and then they have good comprehension, but they are poor in repetition and they are poor in naming. In Wernicke's aphasia, they are the fluent speakers. They are good in fluency, but the problem is that they are poor to comprehend. They have poor repetition, they have poor naming ability. And in global aphasia, non-fluent, poor comprehension, poor repetition, poor naming everywhere. It is somehow what type of total language loss, you can say, the global aphasia. So these are the different types of aphasias. Now again, as we have seen that these are the aphasias, okay, when these parts of the brain, they get damaged, but still we have certain problems with respect to language. The people who are having problem with understanding the written language, or while reading and writing, they have the problem. And neurological basis for visual language processing is that the brain damage can produce that if certain parts of the brain, they get damaged, they produce alexia or agraphia. Alexia is inability to read. The people who are suffering from alexia, they are unable to read properly, And the agraphia, the people they have the inability to write. For example, you have seen the people, some people they are very good speakers, they can speak on different topics for several hours, but if you ask them to write these things, they won't be able to convey whatever they want to convey. So they have the problems with their writing skill, and these people they again, it is said that the actual problem is in the brain, and such type of the disease is known as agraphia. Now dyslexia is actually alexia, the people with an ability to read, problems in learning to read, common in boys and left-handed. Again, another important observation is that dyslexia or alexia, it is usually found in boys, the males, and it is usually found in the people with left hand, who are left-handed. Then high IQs were related with language only. Post-mortem observation revealed anomalies in the arrangement of cortical cells, and it has been seen that the people who are suffering from dyslexia, this arrangement of the cells in their brain is quite different from the normal human beings. And micropolygyria, excessive cortical folding, or ecopias, that is nests of extra cells in unusual location. So these are the two disorders in actual brain. They have this problem of dyslexia, and might have occurred in mid-gestation during cell migration period. There are certain extra cells, or there are certain extra cortical foldings which are found in their brain, and because a result they have problems, they have the inability to read properly. Acquired dyslexia or alexia, which is known as disorder in adulthood as a result of disease or injury, means in some cases this is natural, that is what we have seen, but in some cases they acquire it with certain age, and when they grow up, because of certain disease or injury to the brain, they get this disease, and this, when they acquire this dyslexia, it is known as alexia. And deep dyslexia is that pay attention to wholes like cow, horse, cannot read abstract words, fails to see small differences, do not read each single letter, problem with nonsense words. Surface dyslexia pays attention to details, nonsense words are fine, and suggests two different systems, one focused on the meaning of whole words and the other on the sound of the words. So this way, the people they have inability, who have inability to read, they have certain problems with respect to their brain functions or the structure of the brain. So I hope that today's lecture was very interesting to understand the language in much better, in scientific way, how the brain is involved with respect to this language. What are the different organs of the brain which help us to acquire language, to produce language, to understand language, and to receive language. Then we discussed different areas in the brain, like the left hemisphere and right hemisphere, their roles with respect to language, and further the Broca areas and the Wernicke's area introduction, where it is said the actual language things reside, and the experiments that proves that language is associated with brain, the aphasia. The aphasia is the disease that the certain part of the brain, it gets damaged, and as a result you have certain problems with your language. And we discussed the Broca aphasias, Wernicke aphasia, and global aphasia, and the problems with the people they have inability to read. So I hope this lecture would give you a very much thoroughly in understanding regarding the functions of brain with respect to production, perception, and reception of language. So see you next week, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.